Shalom, my dear friends, Shalom and Shavua Tov. Today, the 6th day of the month of Tevet of the year 5778, corresponding to the 24th of December of the year 2017. And with the help of God, today we will have our full range of Kollel studies, starting with study of the Hebrew letter Kuf, as written in the Sefer Torah, the Tefillin and the Mezuzah, followed by a second introduction to the prophet Hosea, this time focusing on the times of Hosea and who he was. And I hope that we will also be able to address a teaching of Likutei Moharan today. And since we have completed our study of the first of Torah 33 in part 1 of Likutei Moharan, today we shall fly forward to Chelek Bet, the second volume of the original Hebrew printing of the Likutei Moharan, to Torah 61, which is an interesting sequel to the previous teaching that speaks about finding the goodness in the days. And here we will address the subject of time and space, and how very relative they are and dependent upon the limitations of our seichel. But we will come to that. Before we do, I must regretfully announce that today will be the last day of our Kollel studies until a date that will be announced later on, as I've been called to attend my mother's bedside in London, and the earliest flight that I can get is on early Tuesday, and I will be making preparations for travel tomorrow, and it will not be possible for me for the moment to teach this class, and I will obviously notify you, my dear friends, on all developments. So today will be our concluding session until further notice, and as soon as I do know when we will, with God's help, be able to resume, then I will notify people who are subscribed on the Kollel email list and also on the Azamra weekly schedule and diary email. And let us hope and pray for good news on all sides. We need to greatly intensify our prayers for the lovely Eretz Israel, who is thirsty for waters like a deer panting for the waters. And here we are praying for much needed rain, which we hope with God's grace and compassion will fall over the beloved holy land of Israel. And without further ado now, let us turn to our very fascinating study today of the Hebrew letter Kuf. Shalom, today, the 6th day of the month of Tevet of the year 5778, corresponding to the 24th of December of the year 2017. And in our studies of the Hebrew letters as they are written in the Torah scroll and in the Tefillin and the Mezuzah, we now reach our study of the letter Kuf, which is getting close to the end of the Aleph Bet. And indeed, numerically, the letter Kuf ascends from the tens which we've had from the letter Yud, Chof Lamed Mem Nun Tzadik Nun Samach Ayin Pei Tzadik. We've been in the tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. Now with Kuf, we ascend to numerically 100 with this very beautiful letter, which is one of three that come at the end of the Aleph Bet, and which make up the letter, the word Sheker. The letter Kuf together with the letter Shin and the letter Resh make up the Hebrew word Sheker, falsehood. And indeed, those three letters all actually stand only on one leg. This is the distinction of the letter Kuf, which stands on one leg, and also of the letter Shin, where everything joins together at the bottom. And the same is true of the letter Resh, which is perilously standing on one leg. And those three letters together spell out the Hebrew word sheker, falsehood. And this is somewhat bound up with the actual form of the Hebrew letter Kuf, which has its leg descending down beneath the line, the upper part of the letter, which resembles the letter Chof Kefufa, the bent over Chaf, except that the lower base of it is shortened the way it's written, because that accommodates the left hand leg, which takes the form of a nun peshuta, an extended nun, extending down beneath the line. And this contrasts interestingly with the letter Lamed, where the form of the letter is made up again with a letter Chof Kefufa, a bent over Chaf with the lower part considerably shortened, and on the letter Lamed there is a Vav leaping up above the line, whereas in the case of the Kuf, the leg is sinking down below the line. Well, now, the letter He, which is the letter of the divine name, also has a right-hand leg and a right-hand part and a left-hand part, but the letter He stays all within the line of the bases and roofs of the letters. The left-hand leg of the He, which is in the form of an inverted Yud, is not sinking down beneath the line. And this indicates that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, which is expressed in the letter He, does not herself enter into the realm of the forces of darkness. However, the letter Kuf, whose name is the same as the Hebrew word for a monkey, which is a kof, which is a kind of bears relationship to a human being, but is not a human being. In the case of the letter Kuf, the letter does, the left hand lower nun goes way down below the line, beneath the base of the letter, and this comes to indicate that the letter Kuf is a kind of a counter image of the holiness of the He. The Kuf is the one of the sources of the side of the unholy, which is why the letter Kuf is one of the letters of the Hebrew word sheker, where so it only has one leg, like the sister letters of Resh and Shin. In the case of the Hebrew word emet, the three letters that make up that word, the aleph and the mem and the taf, all have their feet firmly on the ground and don't sink beneath the level of the line. The three letters of emet are aleph, with its two legs maintaining a beautiful balance on the line. Likewise, the letter mem, which has a base firmly on the ground, and likewise the letter taf, the third letter of emet, truth. They have two legs firmly on the ground, unlike the letter kuf and its allied letters shin and resh, not in any way to suggest, God forbid, that there is any intrinsic unholiness in the letter. Indeed, the Hebrew word, the Hebrew letter kuf is the first letter of the Hebrew word kadosh, holy, kedusha, holiness. and we refer to God as Kudisha B'richu, the Holy One, blessed be He, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, which begins with the letter Kuf. There is no intrinsic unholiness. Indeed, this teaches that the Holy One encompasses all levels and even for His own inscrutable purposes nurtures the levels of the unholy. And with that, first let us take a look at the letter Kuf as it's actually written in the Torah scrolls and mezuzah and tefillin. Here in front of us on the screen, we have the Pitum HaKtoret, the Torah portions dealing with the manufacture of the temple incense offering with its constituent spices, together with the accompanying teachings from the Mishnah, the Talmud, the Braitot about the incense, and all is written on a parchment here for the sake of those who like to recite this portion from a handwritten parchment. And here we can see the very word ketoret, incense, begins with the letter Kuf, and we can see here how the roof of the letter Kuf is aligned with the roofs of all of the main letters. The letter Kuf does, as we shall discuss presently, have its tag on top, and the letter Kuf has the nun which sinks down beneath the line. And this creates particular issues for the sofer when he is striving to write a letter Kuf where it happens to come on a line which is above a letter that leaps up above, like the letter Lamed. We see how the letter Lamed has its vav on top that is leaping up above into the space between the two lines. The Kuf is sinking down below, and here we have a case where there's a letter Kuf above and a letter Lamed below. And note how the sofer has skillfully left a space between the lower left leg of the Kuf and the upper Vav of the letter Lamed. They do not touch, because were they to be touching, if it were in a Sefer Torah or a mezuzah tefillin, that would be invalid, because each letter has to be completely surrounded by parchment. And so with that, let us come now to our discussion of the laws making up the writing of the letter Kuf as brought down to us in the Mishnat Sofrim of Chafetz Chaim. So the letter Kuf is made up of two separate letters. There is the Chof Kufufa, which is written within the lines, and then on the left-hand side is a separate part that is longer than a letter Zayin. It's not quite as long as a Nun Peshuta, if the Nun Peshuta were being written independently. The left leg then, which is the slightly shortened Nun Peshuta, the extended Nun, is angled next to the Chof, angled going down towards the right-hand side. So for that reason, the letter Kuf is a large letter, and one must make sure that there is enough space below it, as we have seen, in order to have ample room for the lower part of the Kuf, the Zayin part, to come down. So altogether, the dimensions of the Kuf are 5 breadths of the nib of the scribe in height. That is to say, the Chof itself, the roof of the Chof, is accounted as 1 nib breadth. We're not taking into account the tug on the top left-hand side, but the main horizontal line, that is the roof, that is 1 nib breadth. There should be a minimum of a nib breadth between the base of the roof and between the top of the Zayin or the Nun coming down on the left-hand side, and then the third nib breadth coming down is the right-hand base of the Chof Kefufa, and then below the line, the lower leg of the Nun should be extending 2 kulamusim, ideally, making a total of 5. So now, on the right-hand side, the top and bottom corners of the body of the chof kefufah should be rounded, because it is the form of a chof, and the space in the middle of the chof kefufah, as we've said, should be 1 kulamus, 1 nib breadth wide. Now, we don't complete the bottom right-hand base of the chof kefufah. We stop about 1/4 to a half of the way across from the right-hand side coming towards the left. As long as there is a clear bottom section to the chof kefufah, the base of the kuf here, that is valid. Now, on the roof, there should be on the left-hand side 1 tag. As we see, this is the kuf is one of the 6 letters of Aleph Bet that have not the 3 crowns, but 1 single tag. Those are the letters Bet, Dalet, Kuf, Chet, Yud, and Hey. Badak, Haya, Bet, Dalet, Kuf, Chet, Yud, Hey. Those 6 letters, of which the Kuf is the 3rd, have the tag on the left-hand side. But as we shall see in a moment, it should be kept small, and in order that the letter Kuf should not come to have a resemblance to the letter Lamed. If the left-hand tag on the top of the roof were too high, the kuf would start possibly getting confused with a strange lamed. So coming out follow through those laws of the kuf as they're brought down to us in the Chafetz Chaim, in the Mishnat Sofrim, he says that the letter kuf has to have a horizontal roof, with the small tag, as we've said, the thorn on the roof on the left-hand side, to the forward side of the letter, the left-hand side, the thorn, the kots, should be very fine, so that we should not destroy the form of the kuf, so that it should not come to, as we've said, to appear like a lamed if the thorn on top of it were too large. Now, there is a suggestion in the halachic sefer Maaseh Rokeach that for this very reason, it's good for the scribe to keep the little thorn very slightly from the left-hand end of the roof, because likewise that will eliminate too much of a likeness with the lamed, where the top comes straight off the left-hand end of the roof. But in the case of the kuf, if the kuf, if the tag, the thorn, is kept a little way towards the right from the left-hand edge of the roof, then this will further avoid resemblance to the lamed. Now, continues the Chafetz Chaim, the right-hand leg should be well bent down, just like the kafuf, like the letter chof, in other words, bent down around in the lower base of it towards the left, like the kof kefufah, except that the base of the chof part of the kuf must be short. It must not be as long as the roof, in order to make room for the left-hand lower leg. And the left-hand lower leg, writes the Chafetz Chaim, is going to have the form of the nun peshuta, as we have said, but a little shorter. And for that reason, the head of this nun peshuta, now we do not write it with 3 tagin. In the case of the regular nun peshuta, that is one of the Sha'atnez Gatz family that do have 3 tagin, but here the nun peshuta, making up the lower left leg of the kuf, does not have tagin, but it does have a squared roof to indicate that it's a kind of related to the zayin and to the nun peshuta, and it has to get narrower and narrower as it goes down, just like a nun, and it should not be kept lower down from the roof further than the thickness of the roof itself, namely one kulamus, one nib breadth. Now, as we've said, the left-hand leg should, in the first instance, be drawn down diagonally towards the right-hand side, and if we're speaking Kabbalistically, this might indicate how, as much as the holy powers may descend lower down, they incline towards the side of chesed, of kindness. And the scribe must be most careful that the leg must not touch the roof, nor must the leg touch the edge of the yerech, the chof kfufa, the lower base of the chof at its side. It should not be too close to the roof either. It should be there should be sufficient space between the roof itself and the top of this letter Nun, so that if a regular person was standing at the reader's desk reading the Torah, standing at a normal height from the text, he would be able to see clearly that there is a gap between the roof and the letter Nun at the bottom. Now, the leg must not be in the middle of the roof. The roof is not allowed to be extended too far to the left. The leg needs to be under the left-hand edge of the roof. We've already discussed in the case of the letter Hey, what would happen if the roof of the Hey were extended too far to the left, if the lower Yud making up the Hey were in the middle of the roof and not at the left-hand edge of the roof. And exactly the same issues arise with the Kuf, and they are bound up with fairly technical issues related for the scribe to be careful to write the Kuf correctly and maintaining the correct spaces. So now, if any of the parts are touching the two parts, the lower nun and the chof kfufa, if they are touching, if the head of the nun is touching the roof of the chof, or if it's touching the lower base of the chof, then the same laws apply as they do in the case of the letter Aleph and the letter Hey, where when these parts are touching, if that is not the correct form of the letter, and the letter is invalid, and if the scribe's gone further, in many cases he will not be able to correct it. And so with that, we conclude for today our study of the form of the letter Kuf. So with that, my friends, we will now take a break in our studies for just a few moments, and I'll be returning in just a few moments with discussion of the prophet Hosea, and after that, God willing, with teaching from Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. Shalom again, my dear friends. Shalom, and back now to our studies for today. And as we have not as yet gone into the actual text of Hosea, and it would be premature for us to do so, I would like today to discuss Hosea, the man, and his times. Shalom, today, the 6th day of the month of Tevet of the year 5778, corresponding to the 24th of December of the year 2017. And in our continuing studies of the prophets, embarking now on the study of the Trei Asar, the 12 shorter prophets, since Hosea is indeed at the beginning of the Trei Asar in the written manuscripts, I would like to discuss the times of Hosea, which indeed are very explicitly stated at the beginning of his prophecy, as we have seen the opening words of the prophecy of Hosea. דבר השם אשר הויו אל הושע בן בארי בימי עוזיו יותם אחוז יחזקיהו מלכי יהודו ובימי ירבעם בן יואש מלך ישראל. Very clear identification, which will be meaningful to those who have studied the relevant sections of the Book of Kings, the second book of Kings, dealing with this whole period. Be'eri was a prince of the tribe of Reuven, and Hosea, his son, was like the father, a prophet. And here the second verse of Hosea tells us, Techilas diber Hashem b'Hosea, the beginning of the speaking of Hashem to Hosea, which, as we have seen, is actually ambiguous, because it could indicate God's, as it were, telling the prophet to take this harlot woman. But as we have seen also, this verse has the additional connotation that Hosea was the first of some of our most celebrated prophets, who are named by the Talmud, identified by the Talmud in Bava Basra, where these words at the beginning of the prophet, the Lord spoke first to Hosea, and the Talmud asked, did God really speak first with Hosea, not with any other prophets before him? Were there not many prophets between Moses and Hosea? And Rabbi Yochanan says he was the first of 4 prophets who prophesied in that period, and they were Hosea and Isaiah, Amos, and Micah. Accordingly, Hosea preceded those 3 prophets, and that's why the scroll of Hosea is written down at the beginning of the Trei Asar, as we've discussed. The longer prophecies of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, each have a scroll of their own, but because of the relative shortness of these 12, their prophecies were all written together in one scroll, and as they are until today, and Hosea is the first of them. So here we have a very important evidence about the time frame of Hosea. And now to get back to the opening verse, which gives the these 4 kings, Uzziah, Yotam, Ochos, and Yechizkiah. We saw in our discussion from on the base of Rambam, the Mishnah Torah, how Rambam gives us in the introduction the lineage of the prophets of that time, and tells us that Hosea himself received from Zechariah the priest. As I've said, Zechariah the priest is not to be confused with Zechariah at the end of the Trei Asar, the prophet Zechariah. but was the son of Jehoiada, the high priest that was the protector of King Joash, who was revealed to the people after the persecutions of Atalia, as recounted in the second book of Kings. And Jehoiada saved the king, but after the death of Jehoiada, Joash went off the rails, and his son Zechariah, the priest, the son of Jehoiada, was actually murdered in the temple for prophesying about the deterioration of the situation. And so for Hosea to have been the Talmud, the student and the receiver of the line of tradition from Zechariah, the high priest, who's that same Zechariah who, according to the Talmud, his blood boiled in the temple until the time of the destruction of the first temple, because of this terrible crime and affront to the sanctity of the prophet. So here is Hosea, who is the head of the Sanhedrin at this critical juncture in the history of the 12 tribes of Israel. And let us, looking back again at that opening verse, reflect what is the time frame of these kings, these 4 kings mentioned in our text. Well, 5 kings, the 4 kings of Judah and 1 king of Israel. Well, the king Hosea was the grandson of Joash the king. Joash the king was actually, as we find in second book of Kings, chapter 14, Joash was actually killed in a conspiracy. And after Joash came King Amaziah, and King Amaziah also had a bitter end. And he was actually killed in a conspiracy against him, and because he also apparently went off the rails at the end. And in second book of Kings, chapter 14, verse 21, we see that all of the people of Judah took Azariah when he was 16 years old, and they made him king in place of his father Amaziah. So now Azariah, the king, is the one also referred to in our verse as Uzziah. They're one and the same, and he goes by these separate names, be it in the Book of Kings or the Book of Chronicles, where important additional information is available. Now, Uzziah himself was a righteous king, but became so self-righteous that, as recounted in the Book of Kings, and particularly in detail in the Book of Chronicles, Hosea felt that he had the sanctity that would permit him to enter into the holy temple and offer the incense offering on the altar, which is something that the Torah forbids to anyone who is not a priest. And when Uzziah went into the temple sanctuary and offered the incense, immediately he was stricken with leprosy, and the priests herded him out of the temple. And although he survived for many years after he was stricken with leprosy, he could not serve as king because the leper has to be isolated. And therefore the next king in our verse here, King Yotam, entered a regency. When Uzziah was already deposed as king, Yotam was a regent, and after Uzziah died, Yotam continued to be king. And of all the kings of Judah, according to the Talmud, Yotam was the one that was righteous. This is indicated by his name, which is Tam, whole and complete, and he is one of the only kings of Judah of whom no criticism is expressed in the Tanakh, which spares nobody. And indeed, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when he was trying to judge the entire universe in the scale of merit, said that if he had King Yotam with him, they could swing everything to merit. Well, now, a very strange feature of these times of our Tanakh, which I will discuss presently, is that between them, Uzziah and Yotam had a lengthy reign, and then Yotam goes and gives birth to Achaz. So Yotam being righteous, Achaz was very far from righteous. Achaz was actually trying to efface the Torah from Israel, wanted to close the doors of the Batei Midrash, the study halls, and was filling Jerusalem with abominations. And once again, these mysterious swings of the Tanakh, the fourth king of Judah mentioned in our text, spanned by the life of the prophet Hosea, was Yechizkiyahu. Yechizkiyahu was Hezekiah, son of Achaz, and again brought about a complete religious revival in Judea, over whom he reigned. And Yechizkiyahu, on the day of his ascent to the throne of the house of David, actually pulled out the bones of his father and dragged them through the streets to indicate his complete turning away from the wicked ways of his father. And indeed, Yechizkiyahu brought about a complete religious renewal, a spiritual renewal in Judah, a return to the ways of the Torah. Well, now, these were very shocking times, because while these switches in the ruling of the kings of Judah were going on contemporaneously, the northern kingdom was coming to its close. The king of the northern kingdom is here mentioned in our text, the kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes. This is Yeravam ben Yoash. Now, Yeravam ben Yoash was the last great spurt of energy before the final decline of the northern kingdom, and they're being taken into exile. The rule of Yeravam ben Yoash is found recounted in Second Book of Kings, and Yeravam ben Yoash is interestingly mentioned in the prophet Amos. The prophet Amos had a false prophet make accusations against him to Yeravam ben Yoash. This is recounted in the prophecy of Amos, and the king Yeravam ben Yoash did not accept the evil report of against Amos. And according to our sages in the Talmud, that is why Yeravam ben Yoash was worthy of being mentioned in this verse. Although he was part of the evil path of his famous predecessor, Yeravam ben Nevat, Jeroboam, who began the rebellion against the house of David, and now Yeravam ben Yoash was many generations afterwards. He was already of the descendants of Yehu, son of Nimshi, who actually destroyed the house of Ahab and destroyed Jezebel. And Yoash was the descendant and the last great ruler of the line of Yehu, son of Nimshi. And in his time there was a strengthening of the northern kingdom, but that was the last sparks before the exile. So now the prophecy of Hosea spans the declining years of the kingdom of the 10 tribes and their exile, which took place in the reign of Hezekiah, in the 6th year of Hezekiah. So we can well understand why Hezekiah, watching what happened to the 10 tribes because of their deviation from the Torah, was doing in his great return to the Torah, his cleansing of idols from Judea. And most important about Hezekiah, and I think this must be said and brought out clearly for the sake of our understanding of the place of all of our prophets. We already heard that Isaiah came after Hosea. Hosea's student was Amos, and Amos' student was Isaiah. Now, clearly, spiritually, there are relationships between the names of Hosea and Yeshayahu, and also Yehoshua, Joshua. They all have the Hebrew root Yesha, salvation, within them. Hosea is a hif'il form of may he save, as opposed to Yehoshua is God, that is the Savior, and Yeshayahu has the root of Shin Aleph, again, the very beautiful root of the Hebrew word of salvation, Shin Aleph, indicating the 370 lights of God's face that he shines for his salvation. And Hosea was spanning this whole period and watching the decline of Israel and the coming exile, and looking way, way beyond it to the ultimate redemption. Now, as I've said already, Isaiah, Yeshayahu, whose prophecy runs to 66 chapters, is considered to be the prince, the Adon of all, the Lord of all of the later prophets, because of his prophecies reaching up to times of Mashiach in so very much detail, with so much comfort and eloquence and beauty. Hosea, who came considerably earlier, and indeed whose Hebrew seems to be more archaic and less flowing and eloquent, but more solid than that of Isaiah, the student of his student, Hosea was also looking forward to the redemption, as we see in chapter 2 of Hosea, but not in anything like the same detail. The main tenor of Hosea is one of reproof. And indeed, the whole content of the first chapter of Hosea, how God tells him to take this whore of a woman to wife in order to see how it's going to be possible to deal with her when she's constantly going off tracks. So here Hosea's prophecy, with this at its start, addressing Israel and also Judah, is acting as the prophet of reproof, coming in this dire time for the people whose very integrity is now coming to be dissolved because of the forthcoming exile of the 10 tribes. Well, now, I've spoken about the Hebrew letters making up the Hebrew name Hosea, the root of from the root Yesha, he saves, or Vov Shin Ayin, the root of saving, and certainly Hosea was the prophetic grandfather of Isaiah, where they have similar letters in their names, and Hosea was surely also bringing down the truth of Yehoshua, Joshua, also counted as a prophet. But very interestingly, in the Kabbalah, in the writings of Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Ari, who in the Shar HaGilgulim, the Gate of Incarnation, speaks about the roots of all of the souls of the tzaddikim mentioned in the Tanakh and also in the Talmud and Midrash and other sources. The association that Ari, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, makes with the prophet Hosea is of very great interest, very mysterious, because I have not found further commentary on this, but the root of the soul of Hosea, says Ari in Shar HaGilgulim, is that of somebody called Hushai Ho'archi. Now, Hushai Ho'archi appears in 2 Samuel, in the story of Mered Avshalom, the rebellion of Avshalom against his father David HaMelech. And the rebellion became so serious because over to Avshalom went the craftiest, wisest sage of the generation, Achitophel, who in fact was grandfather of Bathsheba, the wife of David, whom he married under these very questionable circumstances. And with Achitophel on the side of Avshalom, the situation for David was so dire that he was forced to abandon Jerusalem. And in Samuel 2, in chapter 15, the moment they said to David that Achitophel was on Avshalom's side, he says, 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 31, David said, well, God frustrate the counsel of Achitophel. And David is retreating from Jerusalem. And that is where Hosea Hoarki comes forth to meet David. And let's remember that most of the tribes of Israel were for Avshalom. They rebelled, the whole tribes of Israel rebelled against David. And here comes Hosea Hoarki, 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 32. His clothes are torn with earth on his head. And David says to him, look, if you cross over with me, you will only be a burden upon me. But if you'll go back to the city, and you will say to Avshalom, your servant am I, of the king shall I be, the servant of your father, and I from then was, and now I shall be your servant. You shall thwart for me the counsel of Achitophel. And David tells Hushai that there are two undercover agents there in the city, the two priests, Tzadok and Eviatar, the priests, who will relay messages to David secretly, and anything Hushai hears from the inner councils of Avshalom, he should tell David. And then in Samuel 2, chapter 16, we see how actually Hushai comes to Avshalom, and Avshalom is very suspicious. You are my father's friend. What are you doing here on my side? He says, no, no, no. I'm really, just as I was servant to your father, so am I to you. And Achitophel had suggested that they should go out immediately in hot pursuit of David. And Hosea Hoarki says, forgive me, but I don't think that's the best idea, because you need to gather, you know that David, your father, will fight like a ferocious lion. You gather together all your troops to fight him. And that sounded to Absalom like a better idea than Achitophel, to gather a big army together. And Achitophel knew that if they don't do it immediately, they will lose. And Achitophel, the moment he heard that Hushai's counsel was taken, went off and hanged himself. The very dramatic end of the beginning of the end of the rebellion of Avshalom, and afterwards it falls completely. So we see here that Arizal is associating Hosea Hoarki there in Book of Kings with the root of the soul of Hosea. And this is very interesting because Hosea Hoarki, who is identified as the friend of the king, which is quite amazing status to have, to be friend of David HaMelech, King David. And Hosea here we see actually has this role of subterfuge in thwarting the rebellion of Avshalom, which is really a prototype of the later rebellion of Jeroboam and the 10 tribes against the house of Judah. Because Absalom was doing a similar thing. He took took the other tribes of, including Judah, all against David, and David was only left with a small relic of David's most faithful followers. And so the rebellion of Absalom, had it succeeded, would have destroyed David's true lineage, and it was thwarted by Hosea Arki. And perhaps here we can see the association with the prophet Hosea. That the prophet Hosea, who is addressing both Israel and Judah, and is not a priest, and he's not from the tribe of Judah, he's from the tribe of Reuven. And all of the different tribes in their time provided shoftim, judges, or leaders for Israel. And here Hosea was in this role now from the tribe of Reuven, who was Jacob's firstborn son of Leah, the first of all of the tribes. And here Hosea is indeed taking on the role of the Navi, the prophet of reproof. And I must confess that the more that I study the book of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, the more mystified I am about what exactly was going on in those times. As we see in the reproof of Hosea against the people through the word of God in his mouth, he was reproving the people for zenut. Zenut, namely, going aside into immorality. And we see the whole progress of the rebellion against the house of David under Jeroboam, which took place in the reign of David's grandson, Rehoboam, son of Solomon. And the original rebel Yeravam ben Nevat started off as a tzaddik. He stood up and reproved Solomon for giving more preference to his foreign wives than he did to the people coming up to Jerusalem. And Solomon took exception to that, and Jeroboam had to go in flight to Egypt, and only when Solomon died did Jeroboam come back, and that's when the tribes went to Solomon's son, Rehoboam, and asked him to lighten their burden. He said, if you think I'm weak, you should know that my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. And if he chastised you with whips, I will chastise you with scorpions. And that is when Jeroboam and the tribe of Ephraim and the other tribes, with the exception of Judah and Benjamin, rebelled against the house of David. They said, go home, we have no part in the house of David. Now, Jeroboam, who was very wise, who is considered by our sages to have been able to darshan the Torah in unbelievable number of ways, was fearful that if the people start yearning to go up to Jerusalem, they will soon forget their loyalty to him and return to loyalty to the house of David. As we see recounted in the first book of Kings, in the account of the reign of Rehoboam after Solomon, Jeroboam said in his heart that if the people miss Jerusalem and go there, that will be a problem, and that is why he established his idolatry. The oxen in Dan and Beersheba, the idols of Bet-El, which is the beginning of the whole decline of the people. We already see alluded to in Joshua partially, and more visibly in Judges, and quite present in Book of Samuel, the numerous forms of idolatry being practiced by the surrounding peoples and the interest of the Israelites in them. And that indeed was what proved fatal for the ability of Israel to stay in the land, and they were coughed up out of this. But exactly what these idolatries were is very hard to assess, and we do need to try to understand in order to understand how to relate what these prophets are talking about when they address us, where these forms of idolatry are defunct, because the idolaters of the ancient world were extremely sophisticated. They were bound up with the astronomical movements of the sun and the moon and the planets, of which the ancients were very cognizant, and they understood all of the mapping and the astrology of the heavens and the zodiac, and we have relics of this until today in the days of the week corresponding to the planets and so on and so forth. They were extremely sophisticated, and the big great difference, I think, between that world and the world we have today is that it's the world prior to the Greek rationalism was a world of deities that were treated as deities and respected and worshipped as deities. By the time of Socrates and Plato and the later Greeks, this mythology has been replaced with philosophy, with Epicureanism and Gnosticism and various other philosophies. And idolatry and paganism recur again and again, and they obviously come in through the history of religion in the form of officially and supposedly monotheistic religions that actually have cult and pagan activities. To what extent these can be easily related to the idolatries of the Tanakh? We hear about the idolatry of the Baal, which seems to be more related to the sun, and the idolatry of the Asherah, that seems to be more related to the moon. We hear of the gods of Moav, Chemosh, and the god of Ammon, who is called Malkom, or the Molech. And we hear references to the gods of the Edomites and the Sidonians, and exactly what these were is, as I say, I find extremely hard to assess. But clearly the bent of the later Kabbalistic and Hasidic interpretation of the Torah and the prophets, when we are talking about concepts of zenut, the turning aside from the purity of the emunah, the faith of the Torah, to other forms of service and other methods, we here are on better ground, I think, to relate these prophecies to our age, to see how there are parallel turnings aside in our age, to which the words of the prophet that appear to relate to events and themes of thousands of years ago can be better understood as relating to our times. With that, my friends, I will conclude now speaking about Hosea, and we'll make a very brief interval, and would like to come back to share with you one Torah, which I think takes our studies of Torah 33 in the first chelik of the Gutamana stage further by addressing higher levels of time and space. I'll be back in just a very few moments with the next section of our studies. Shalom again, my dear friends. Shalom. And for the third and final part of today's studies, and for some time ahead until further notice, this will be our last class. And God willing, I hope we will be able to resume our studies very shortly. And with the help of God, now let us turn to a most amazing teaching of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev that with the help of God will help to put matters of space and time into perspective. So with that, let us turn now to the study of Likutei Moharan. Shalom, today, the 6th day of the month of Tevet of the year 5778, corresponding to the 24th of December of the year 2017. And we come now to the study of teaching 61 in the second volume of the original Hebrew printing of Likutei Moharan, Torah Samach Aleph in Chelek Beis of Likutei Moharan, a teaching about time in which Rabbi Nachman of Breslev most skillfully teaches us how to set our thoughts above the limited time frame in which we live. Hashem Yisborach hu lemalo mi hazman. The blessed name God is above time. Kamuvon, this is brought down in all of the Sfarim HaKadoshim that it is God who indeed creates time. This matter is in truth a most wondrous and concealed matter. It is impossible to understand this with the human intellect. But you must know that the very root of time comes about only because we do not understand, through a lack of understanding. That is to say, on account of our human intellect being small. The more that the sechel, the intellect, is greater, time becomes smaller, and until it is more and more nullified, time ceases to exist. And now Rabbi Nachman will give us a most fascinating mashal, a symbolic metaphor through which to understand and extrapolate on what he is telling us. For in a dream, where then the regular day-to-day ego intellect departs, there is left to the person only the power of imagination, thinking in symbols and dream images. At that time, in the dream state, in a quarter of an hour, it is possible to go through the entire 70 years of human life. Like it appears in a dream, all kinds of different times and events all pass over and go by in a very short time. Afterwards, when we awaken from the sleep, then we see that all of those times, those 70 years that passed over in a dream, it was actually all a very short time in truth, measured by the clocks of day-to-day living. And this because afterwards, when the person awakens and then the sechel returns, the intellect returns into them, ויצר השכל כל אלו ה-70 שונו שעברו בחלום הם רק רבע שעה אצלוי. Now, for the intellect itself, all of those 70 years that passed by apparently in the dream, they're only 1/4 of an hour according to the time reference of the sechel. רק 70 שנה ממש הם 70 שנה גם אצל השכל שלנו. Now, 70 years in reality, namely by our clock time, these are indeed 70 true long years of hours when it comes to our earthly waking intellect. But in truth, on the level of the seichel that is higher above the level of our constricted human consciousness, on the level of a spiritual consciousness that may be possessed by angels or higher beings beyond ours, also what is calculated by us as 70 years in, as we say, real time. According to that higher intellect, that's also only 1/4 of an hour or less. Just like we see that it's possible for 70 years to pass by in a dream. Afterwards we know, according to our intellect, our seichel, that was only 1/4 hour. Also, when it comes to real time, what is considered by our seichel to be 70 years, in the eyes of the higher intelligent above our intellect, that's only 1/4 of an hour. But we on our constricted level cannot understand this. Also, if you were in a dream and somebody came over to you and said in the time of the dream, he said to you, all this that appears to you that are passing days and years, that is nothing, that's just 1/4 of an hour, the person would not have believed him at all. Because according to the appearance in the dream, the likeness of the passage of the time, it appears to the person that days and years are passing by, literally. And likewise, exactly with the nimshal to which this mashal of the dream state and the waking state in our life is referring to, even though according to our intellect, according to our level, it appears that real time is 70 years is 70 years, according to the greater intellect, that's only 1/4 of an hour. And so it goes from level to level as we ascend the Kabbalistic worlds where the time frames are measured in years and yovels and hundreds and thousands. We go above and above. On the level of the intellect that is further above, that time that according to the intellect just above our level is not considered anything of significance. But on the level of the intellect that even above that level, that's considered to be the tiniest speck. We go on from level to level above. We are on mind-boggling levels here of expanses of time. We're in the light years, millions and billions of years. On that level, time is not considered to be of any significance or importance whatever. Because of the greatness of that supreme divine intellect, all time is nothing, zero, completely. Just like by us, the 70 years that appeared to pass by in a dream is only a quarter of an hour in truth. There is likewise level above level of intellect until time is completely nullified. And that is why King Moshiach, that there has passed over him everything that has passed over him from the day of the creation of the world. The soul of Moshiach has suffered what he has suffered. After all that, at the end, God, blessed be He, will say to Melech Moshiach, Beni Ato, you are my son, as it's written in Psalm 2. Beni Ato, ani hayoim yodedeticho, I today have given birth to you, a completely new beginning, a new birth, time on a new level, it's today. This is a most surprising and wondrous matter, to our appearance. All this is on account of the great power of the holy intellect of Moshiach, the holy soul. According to the greatness of the level that he will be holding by then. On account of the extreme power of the height of his intellect, that will grow up there so very greatly. For that reason, because of his level, all of the time that has passed over him, from the day of the creation of the world till that time, Kulo ein vo efes mamash, all is nothingness, zero, literally. Mamash kilo nola dayom will be actually, even after all of this long time, will be as if he's born today. Ki is batel kol azman b'sichloi, because all time will be nullified with the power of his intellect. Sheyeh godel ma'od, which will be so great. That is why God, blessed be He, will say to Mashiach, Ani hayoim yodedeticho, today have I given birth to you. Hayoim mamash, today, now, ki kol azman she'ova, all the time that passed, ayin vo efes legamri, it's all nothingness, it's all zero completely. We see likewise in space. So now Rabbi Nachman takes us into the other dimension of creation. In the same way with space, listen to what he says now. That the master of power is able to traverse, to go across a great space in a very short hour, a short time. Well, whether Rabbi Nachman here is talking about tzaddikim on the level of Baal Shem Tov that had kefitzas haderech, the springing of the journey, or perhaps if he could be speaking or alluding to the unidentified flying objects that are being spoken about today that have acceleration rates that, according to claims made by purported experts, are entirely above our human capacity to understand how items can accelerate and turn corners so fast. Anyway, says Rabbi Nachman, we see that the Baal Koyach is able to pass across a great space in a short hour. So for this Baal Koyach, this master of power, all of that space is small. Like, it's different between if you're walking or riding on a donkey or traveling in a jet aircraft. For those who are weak in power, little ants, such a space, such a distance would be very great. They'd have to travel for a long, long hour of time until they would cross that space. So it is, using this as another mashal, so it is above and beyond now in terms of space and superspace. All that the power is even greater. So physical space shrinks all the more. In space, as in the case of time, the space shrinks until physical space as we know it is of no significance. And that's why God can be in all places at once, because physical places have no significance. But with our seichel, it's not possible to understand all of this. Just like it is impossible during the dream to understand the truth. We cannot understand that all of that time that apparently passes in the dream is really nothing when it comes to truth. Likewise, we cannot understand we cannot understand with our level of intellect that all time and above us is all nullified in the eyes of the higher intellect. With that, my dear friends, we conclude our studies for today, and our thoughts and prayers are for the living, that God should give life and fullness of life and blessing and compassion. As I have stated, I'm not able to proceed with our Kollel studies for the immediate period, owing to my need to travel urgently to London just as soon as I can after the holiday. I'll be leaving early Tuesday and must prepare myself tomorrow for my journey to, with God's help, see my mother in life with us here. And I will notify you who are subscribed on the Kollel newsletter and the Azamra diary and schedule emails about plans for the resumption of our studies, which I hope will be very shortly at a good hour with renewed strength. And in the meantime, my dear friends, please do feel free to contact me if I am tardy in replying. I'm sure you will understand and bear with me. And for the moment, I do wish you Shavua Tov Umvorach, a good and a blessed week. This week on Thursday is Asara B'Tevet, the fast of the 10th of Tevet. And let us see with our own eyes in our generation the fast of the 10th month, the 10th of Tevet, as prophesied by the prophet Zechariah, transformed into a day of festivity for all Israel. Shalom for now from Yerushalayim, lehitraot, to looking forward to our seeing each other again very soon in good health and strength. Shalom from the holy city of Yerushalayim.